You ever get that gut feeling, like the world just decided to flip itself inside out on a random Tuesday? Yeah, that was me, staring down at a $200,000 luxury cabin built smack on my family's mountain property, right over the stone my grandfather carved with his bare hands. Palmer family land forever, like some cosmic joke. Only the punchline was a lawsuit with my name on it. They sued me for destroying my own land. Wild, right? But hang on, let me back up a sec. My name's Greg Palmer. I'm not anybody special, just a regular guy who inherited a piece of Colorado mountainside after my granddad passed in '89. He was a farmer, tough as nails, kept every deed, every tax stub, every scrap of paper like it was pure gold. If you asked anyone in the valley, they'd tell you Dan Palmer never signed anything without reading it 3 times and grumbling about lawyers the whole way through. You know what I mean? So you can imagine how it felt, rounding the bend on my old ATV after 2 months away and seeing not just a new building, but a straight-up mountain resort, right where our family stone always stood, like the land itself had been hijacked. I sat there, jaw on the floor, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone while snapping photos. GPS, timestamp, the works. There wasn't a single mistake about it. Somebody had come onto my property, paved a road, hooked up power, and built the fanciest log cabin I've ever seen, all without so much as a howdy-do or a courtesy call. It felt personal, almost surgical, like someone had mapped out exactly what mattered to us and then buried it under river rock and copper gutters. Did I mention the timing? I'd just finished a hell month at work, bills piling up, barely time to breathe. And then this. Like the universe wanted to see how much one man could take before snapping. I called my buddy Jake, old high school friend, hunting partner, the kind of guy who's seen enough to know when something's off. Told you, man, Jake said. Land like this? Always somebody sniffing around. But not like this. Not with a fake HOA, a president with a $500 haircut and documents. Real, notarized, signed by my own grandfather, saying they owned a chunk of my bloodline. Enter Claire Jenkins, HOA Queen Bee, waltzing up in an SUV that probably costs more than my house. She hands me this stack of papers with all the confidence of a lawyer at a foreclosure sale, doesn't even blink when I tell her she's trespassing. Mr. Palmer, you're mistaken, she says, her smile sharp as a hunting knife. Your grandfather signed an easement in 1987. It's all legal, I'm afraid. Except, I know my granddad. He'd have sooner sold his tractor than hand over family land. Now, maybe I looked rattled, I was. But Rebecca, my wife, has the best lawyer brain in the family. Don't sign. Don't talk. Take pictures. I'm on my way. She's got a knack for smelling trouble before it hits, and this time, her radar was off the charts. That night, our kitchen turned into a war room. Papers everywhere, sticky notes, flashlights, coffee mugs crowding the table. Rebecca holds up the easement next to Grandpa's will, signed just 2 years apart. The signatures? Not even close. The easement signature was crisp, strong, written by a man in his prime. The will? Wobbly, tired, exactly like I remember Grandpa at the end. That's when it hit us. Someone had been collecting samples of Grandpa's signature over the years, probably rooting through files, piecing together his handwriting to make a perfect forgery. But who? And how deep did this go? Claire didn't even flinch when I started asking questions. She doubled down, brought in experts, an archaeologist in a brand new field vest, waving around fake arrowheads and stories about ancient fire circles. This is a heritage site, he said, all authority and no soul. Jake just snorted, nudged me, whispered, that's Denver tourist shop junk. And sure enough, the so-called artifacts were as fresh as the receipts in my glove box. Even the ancient stones had mortar stains from the new construction. The whole thing was a set piece, props, actors, the works. But the twist? That wasn't even the most sinister part. While the expert was droning on, Claire's purse tipped, spilling out papers that made my stomach drop. My grandfather's army letters, property records, stuff that never left our house. She'd been digging deep, probably had help on the inside. That's when I realized this wasn't about one cabin. She'd been targeting our family for years. The next day, demolition was set. Jake and I were ready, Deputy Morgan supervising, nerves frayed. Right on cue, an environmental consultant shows up in a state van. Real gear, official forms, talks about landslides and critical soil stabilization. If you didn't know the area, you'd buy every word. But Jake starts poking holes. This is granite, Doc. What's unstable about that? She dodges, pivots, sweats a little when Morgan checks her credentials. Turns out the van's plates are fake, her ID's a print job, and nobody in the state knows who she is. Claire just smiles, starts dialing county officials, stalls the whole operation. Watching her twist a busted con into a legitimate delay was like seeing a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat after everyone spotted the trapdoor. But the house of cards couldn't hold. Jake spotted the wrong plate fonts on the van, and Morgan called in state investigators. Suddenly, what looked like a small-town scam started to unravel into something much bigger. Fake government tags, phony environmental reports, Dr. Deeds, the works. Rebecca started pulling threads, found patterns that matched other inheritance frauds across 6 states. Turns out, Claire was running a franchise, digital campaigns, bots, fake Facebook groups, all designed to isolate us, stir up the community, and wear us down. She even built psychological profiles, tracked our schedules, finances, family ties, like we were just data points in her spreadsheet of misery. The next shocker came from her own husband, Mark. Poor guy looked like he'd aged a decade in a week. He came to us with a USB drive, hands shaking, voice cracking. I lived with her, Greg. I thought I knew her. But she's not even human, man. She's a machine. On that drive, evidence of everything. Emails, contracts, a literal playbook for breaking families, right down to the day. Month 3, environmental violations. Month 6, property tax hikes. Month 9, marital stress campaigns. She'd even outlined how to target families at their weakest, after funerals, during holidays, when nobody had the energy left to fight. You ever read something so cold, so calculated, it makes you want to shower just to wash off the chill? That's what it was like. And then there were the real plans. Her environmental project was a front for a massive luxury resort deal, set to destroy hundreds of acres, reroute streams, clear-cut forests. All that talk of heritage and conservation was just a smokescreen for big money. And the developers? They weren't just building. They were targeting military families, veterans, anybody less likely to kick up a fuss for fear of looking unpatriotic. Mark's conscience finally snapped when he saw Claire prepping her next mark. The Morrisons, who'd just lost their dad. She'd already infiltrated their social media, mapped out their grief, and started building fake support networks online, ready to move in as soon as the dust settled. Her whole operation was a factory of heartbreak. Training materials, performance bonuses, a 6-figure monthly income built on tearing families apart. And it wasn't just here. Claire was one cell in a network stretching across the West, buying off officials, hacking records, laundering cash through dummy companies. You want to talk about cinematic? Try the moment Mark went full whistleblower. He risked everything, wired up his house, started recording Claire's late-night calls with the developers. The stuff he caught, her talking about capitulation thresholds, describing exactly how to push families to the breaking point, referencing other cases where medical issues just happened to flare up when people wouldn't sell. When the recordings went to court, Claire's lawyers played the only card they had. Paint Mark as an abusive husband, a liar, a nut job. But she was too organized for her own good. Every accusation was outlined in her files as a backup plan if things went south. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. During the trial, Mrs. Patterson, old lady from down the street, always watering her roses, stood up, pulled a badge from her purse, and announced she was Special Agent Patterson, FBI Financial Crimes. 18 months undercover, dozens of families targeted, millions stolen, and suspicious deaths linked across the region. The question, she said, eyes locked on Claire, isn't just about fraud. It's about whether Mrs. Jenkins will cooperate to help us find the other victims whose deaths weren't natural. The whole courtroom went dead quiet. Even Claire looked rattled for the first time. Turns out, the real story was so much darker. Systematic harassment, tampered medication, isolated families dying right after lawsuits hit. Shell companies, offshore accounts, a network so tight it had taken years just to untangle the shell games. In the end, it wasn't just about our land. It was about justice for dozens, maybe hundreds, of families Claire and her network had preyed on. And the thing that finally brought her down? Her own obsession with documentation. She kept records, videos, even a diary for training purposes, like she was some evil Tony Robbins for property thieves. That mountain of evidence buried her. No way out. No one left to bribe. I wish I could tell you that was the end. But if you're still with me, you know stories like this never tie up neat. The FBI cleaned house, seized Claire's assets, prosecuted the network, forced restitution for the families. Rebecca and I rebuilt the memorial garden for my granddad, engraved a second stone for the other families who lost their heritage. Mark, braver than I'll ever be, helped bring down the whole rotten enterprise, even as his life fell apart in the process. 2 years later, Agent Patterson handed me a file. Gregory, your grandfather wasn't just a farmer. He was a surveyor who helped draw the lines for protected wilderness across Colorado. He spent his life making sure families like yours had something to pass down. His death? Turns out, maybe not as simple as we thought. And if you're wondering what else these networks are hiding in your own backyard, well, maybe you ought to check your fence lines, too. So now I gotta ask, if your family was targeted, would you fight, or would you fold? Have you ever discovered someone you trusted living a double life? Drop your story below. Tell me what justice really means to you. Like, share, argue it out. I'll be reading every word. And remember, sometimes the battle for what's right is just beginning when the rest of the world thinks it's over.